shifting customers into cheaper My Super products. Business reporter Michael Yander has been blogging the hearings live for ABC News Online.
For most of today, Linda, the witness was Nicole Smith, who was the chair of the trustee board responsible for NAB's super funds until June this year. Now, that's the trustee board that's supposed to put members' interests above everything else. She was quizzed about a few topics, but the day started with continued examination of this fee for no service scandal. During 2016, it became clear to NAB that it would have to pay back the fees that it had collected over the previous few years, where no financial advice had been provided to superannuation customers, even though they were paying for it. Also, through that mid to late 2016 period, NAB was in discussions with the corporate regulator ASIC over what penalties, if any, the bank would have to face, as well as paying the money back. It seems from the evidence that ASIC was considering either an enforceable undertaking or altering the bank's licence conditions for the super funds, which is what they ended up imposing. On counsel assisting Michael Hodges' view, that is not enforcement action.
One of the difficulties in this area is that I use the word enforcement action in a different way from people.
From the accounting brain? Yeah.
Sorry?
From the accounting brain?
No, it's not an accounting brain thing. When I talk about enforcement action, I mean a proceeding commenced in a court alleging a contravention of the Acts. But for some reason, that's not what enforcement action means in this area.
I don't believe that ASIC was discussing enforcement action with us in any form other than the licence conditions that we ended up entering into.
Now, following that exchange, Linda, just afterwards, Commissioner Kenneth Hayne asked NAB's Nicole Smith the following question.
Do you think yourself that taking money to which there was no entitlement raised a question of the criminal law?
I didn't.
Now, that's a question many in the community have been asking, Linda. Why is theft by a bank treated so differently by regulators to theft from a bank? And it'll be interesting to see what Commissioner Hayne concludes.
Now, the other big focus of today's evidence from NAB was about conflicts of interest plaguing its super funds. Can you explain what those were?
As I said earlier, there's a legal requirement for those super trustees to act in the best interest of the fund's members. Yet not only did NAB charge fees for no service and delay the action to refund those fees, the Commission also heard that it continued paying commissions, grandfathered commissions, to financial planners under an exemption in the law. And it seems to have done that to prevent those planners taking their clients elsewhere if the Commission stopped flowing to them. That would have been bad for the business by reducing the funds under management and the fees it was collecting. But Miss Smith was the chair of the trustees, supposed to safeguard the members' interests, and yet the Commission heard the trustees were getting advice from management of NAB's wealth division, the division making profits from these fees, to continuing buttering up advisors with these ongoing commissions and keeping customers longer in higher fee default funds instead of moving them quickly to My Super with lower fees.
And there was a heated exchange between Commissioner Hayne and NAB's lawyer towards the end of the day. What was that?
Well, look, it may have had something to do with the broken air conditioning in the hearing room. NAB has repeatedly tried to have marked as confidential and not for public release some of the communications between it and the regulator ASIC. Now, one of these debates is ongoing, and Ms Smith actually got off the stand this afternoon and will be back tomorrow morning while this issue is resolved overnight. But while this application was pending, NAB's counsel Neil Young questioned whether Miss Smith should not be made to come back tomorrow morning at all, but the way he argued that point angered Commissioner Hayne.
We fail to apprehend at the moment why this matter and the tender of these documents need involve Miss Smith at all, nor detain her, because on our instructions, her answer will be that she had no involvement.
Well, you will not give her answer, Mr. Young. You will not. Do you understand me?
I'm not attempting to give any answer, Commissioner.
Given Kenneth Hayne's general principle that evidence should be public unless there's a compelling reason otherwise, we could see some more fireworks between the two of those eminent lawyers tomorrow morning.
The ABC's senior digital business reporter Michael Yander, who will be live blogging the Royal Commission this week and next, so keep an eye out for that. You're listening to PM. I'm Linda Mottram. I'm on Twitter at Linda Mottram if you'd like to contact me that way. Stay with me now, though. We're going to cast our minds forward and try to imagine a future where we're all driving hydrogen-powered cars.
So CSIRO's technology is completely clean
bipartisan celebration. But the Turnbull government is still fending off questions about how and why it chose to award $444 million to a little-known charity. A parliamentary inquiry is looking into why so much taxpayers' money was handed over to the charity called the Great Barrier Reef Foundation without a tender process. Labor leader Bill Shorten says the foundation should just give the money back. Peter Lloyd reports.
Until now, big sums of taxpayer money to protect and preserve the Great Barrier Reef flowed through the Federal Environment Department, but not anymore. The Great Barrier Reef Foundation charity, with just 15 employees, is now gatekeeping $444 million in federal funds. Its managing director, Anna Marsden, told RN Breakfast the foundation will be up to the task once it's big enough.
We have been around for 18 years. We have got a phenomenal track record of delivering private and public partnerships that have a positive impact on the health of the Great Barrier Reef.
It was back on the 9th of April that the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, Environment Minister Josh Frydenberg and Foundation Chair John Schubert met. No public servant was present. Less than a month later, and without any competitive tender process, Minister Frydenberg announced that the foundation was to be trusted with hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money. Anna Marsden says the foundation understands all the public suspicion.
So we understand that. We understand that we are not known outside the reef community. We understand we are not a household name. We understand we have to do more to earn that trust.
The opposition is having none of it. Bill Shorten.
I think the money should be returned. We've already said that. How did this nation get to a point where $444 million of taxpayer money just gets handed out? Either recipients weren't aware it was going to happen, the Prime Minister just makes the decision.
At a media conference in Melbourne, Josh Frydenberg was asked to give guarantees about the process that awarded money to the foundation.
Now, the foundation is a very reputable organisation. It's been going for nearly 20 years. It has raised an enormous amount of money from the private sector and attracted government money, both state and federal, including from the Labor government. When Tony Burke was the Minister for the Environment, he gave money to this foundation.
For its part, the foundation says it represents a chunk of corporate Australia that desperately wants to see the reef repaired. Board members are from Qantas and several mining companies, including BHP. One of its projects uses an underwater robot to kill crown-of-thorns starfish. The Australian Conservation Foundation has been taking a close look at Anna Marsden's statements in the past few days and remains sceptical. Matt Rose is the ACF's economist.
So the ACF appreciates that she acknowledged that climate change is the greatest threat to the Great Barrier Reef. We are extremely disappointed that what the foundation thinks its role in dealing with climate change is to essentially vacate the space and not advocate in any way, and is to deal with what we consider second-order issues, which are important in terms of reef health and resilience, but aren't the main game.
Just unpack that for me a bit. What do you mean by that?
Well, the foundation has said, they put in their submission to the Senate inquiry, and they said publicly that public advocacy around any issue, including climate change, is not why they exist as a foundation. Their role is to look at reef resilience and research and science into the health of the reef, accepting climate change as an issue. So they acknowledge it as an issue, but they don't advocate in any way for anything to be done about it.
The Great Barrier Reef Foundation says it will collaborate with agencies like
Najib Razak was charged with 3 new money laundering charges. The charges stem from the State Development Fund 1MDB, which Najib Razak set up in 2009. The fund amassed billions in debts and is being investigated in the United States and several other countries for alleged cross-border embezzlement and money laundering through a web of banks. One of them was SRC International, a former unit of the 1MDB fund which was meant to pursue investments in energy resources. But police say it funneled more than $13 million into Najib Razak's personal account. His lawyer says the new charges are insignificant.
Now, Anti-Money Laundering Act is a big word, but it strictly means proceeds of crime. It is tied up to the first 3 charges in the main case. So I want to stress, it's got nothing to do with 1MDB.
Public anger led to the defeat of Najib Razak's long-ruling coalition in May, when a shock election result brought his former mentor, Mahathir Mohamad, back to power. The new government reopened an investigation into 1MDB and barred Najib Razak and his wife from leaving the country. Police also seized jewellery and valuables valued at more than $360 million from properties linked to him. His stepson, a Hollywood film producer, has also been questioned for allegedly using stolen money to finance movies such as The Wolf of Wall Street. The former Prime Minister has always denied the charges.
I didn't have any knowledge whatsoever of monies coming in. I would not have condoned and allowed it if I knew.
That was Najib Razak in June, in an interview with Reuters, where he vowed to clear his name.
I never had plans to leave, because if I leave, there's presumption of guilt. You cannot just leave a country. My roots are here, my family is here. I cannot just leave the country. I cannot be a fugitive for the rest of my life. I want to clear my name. I want to put records straight.
If found guilty, Najib Razak faces up to 15 years in jail for each money laundering offence and may be forced to pay back the stolen money 5 times over. He also faces a maximum penalty of 20 years in jail for each charge of power and breach of trust. Sandra Seagian with that report. There's more worrying news about superbugs today. A new report has sounded the alarm about 2 sets of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. One, an organism often found in hospitals, and the other, some strains of the sexually transmitted disease gonorrhea, some of which are making their way into Australia. Manu Bobo reports.
Patients visit hospitals to get better, and most of the time they do. Occasionally, already sick people will pick up a nasty superbug, and these bugs are becoming increasingly resistant to treatment.
The ones that worry us most are the so-called carbapenemas producing Enterobacterales. I understand that's a complete mouthful. We like to call them CPE. These are the bacteria that cause invasive infections in humans, and by that I mean blood poisoning or septicemia in particular.
That's Professor John Turnage. He's a senior medical advisor for the Australian Commission on Safety and Quality in Healthcare, which has today released a 6-monthly report on its alert system. The report shows that some antibiotics that used to work on CPE no longer do. That means relying on old drugs that may not be entirely safe.
We're now gone back to the cupboard to use a very old antibiotic called colistin for treatment. It's not a very effective antibiotic by itself, but it's all we have in those particular cases. And we also know that it's associated with toxicity. It can damage the kidneys, it can damage the nervous system.
Next to CPE, the organism responsible